Your EMP-proof truck starts after the pulse. You drive 50 miles, then it dies. Why? Because you forgot these 7 parts. Most preppers spend thousands on the right vehicle but skip the $200 in parts that will actually save them. In this video, I'm breaking down which parts fail, why they fail, and exactly where to buy them before it's too late. You bought that 1980s Ford F-150. You made sure it has a carburetor and mechanical ignition. The EMP hits. Your truck starts right up while everyone else is stranded. You're celebrating. Then 30 miles down the road, your battery light comes on. Voltage drops. Engine sputters. Dead. What happened? Your alternator just failed from cascade damage. Even mechanical vehicles have vulnerable components. The difference is, these parts fail after the initial pulse, not during it. And without spare parts, you're walking. You can't drive to AutoZone because AutoZone is closed. The supply chain is dead. The parts you have stockpiled are the only parts you'll ever get. So let's get into the 7 critical parts. I'm starting with the most vulnerable and working down. Part number 1, the alternator. This is the single most likely component to fail after an EMP. Your alternator charges the battery while the engine runs. Inside every alternator are semiconductor diodes that convert AC current to DC. An EMP can fry these diodes through electromagnetic induction, even in older alternators. Here's what happens. After the EMP, your truck starts fine because the battery has enough charge, but the alternator isn't working. The battery slowly drains, powering your ignition, lights, and other systems. Eventually, usually within 30 to 100 miles, depending on your battery condition, you're dead in the water. The engine needs 12 volts minimum to run the ignition. Once the battery drops below that, it's over. Symptoms of alternator failure: your battery warning light comes on, voltage gauge drops below 12 volts if you have one installed, headlights dim, engine runs rough, then dies. By the time you see these symptoms, you're already stranded. You need a spare alternator. For a 1980s Ford F-150, you're looking at $60 to $120 at AutoZone or O'Reilly Auto Parts. Same price range for a Jeep Cherokee XJ. Buy a remanufactured unit from Duralast or Ultima brand. These are quality parts at reasonable prices. How to choose the right one? Check your owner's manual or look at the label on your current alternator for the amp rating. Common ratings are 65 amp, 75 amp, or 90 amp. Buy the correct rating for your vehicle. If you're not sure, bring your old alternator to the store and they'll match it. Storage. Alternators contain semiconductor diodes, so they need Faraday cage protection. A metal trash can with a tight-fitting lid works perfectly. Ground the can by attaching a wire from the can to a ground rod or metal pipe driven into the earth. Line the inside with cardboard so the alternator doesn't directly touch the metal. This prevents any induced current from reaching the electronics inside. How many spares? 1 minimum. 2 if you can afford it. If your first spare fails during installation or has a defect, you want a backup. Part number 2, voltage regulator. Older vehicles from the 70s and early 80s often have external voltage regulators. This is a separate box mounted on the firewall or inner fender that controls alternator output. Ford vehicles especially used external regulators through the mid-80s. GM vehicles started integrating the regulator inside the alternator in the 70s. The regulator contains solid-state electronics that are vulnerable to EMP. If it fails, your alternator either overcharges and fries your battery, or it undercharges and leaves you stranded. Either way, you're stuck. Check your vehicle. If you see a small metal box with wires going to it near the alternator, that's your voltage regulator. If you don't see one, your regulator is built into the alternator, and you don't need a separate spare. For Ford F-Series trucks before 1986, most have external regulators. Price: $20 to $40 at AutoZone or O'Reilly. Brand: Duralast or Standard Motor Products. These are cheap and essential if your vehicle has one. Storage: Faraday cage. Same metal trash can as your alternator. Label everything so you know what's what in an emergency. Part number 3, electronic ignition module. This only applies if your vehicle has electronic ignition instead of points. Many vehicles from the mid-70s through 80s had what's called breakerless electronic ignition. Ford's DuraSpark, GM's HEI, Chrysler's electronic ignition. These systems use a small electronic module to trigger the ignition coil. The good news: these modules are more robust than modern engine computers. Many will survive an EMP. The bad news: some won't, especially if they're energized when the pulse hits. And if yours fails, your engine won't start at all. Symptoms: engine cranks but won't start. No spark at the spark plugs. This is different from alternator failure, where the engine starts then dies. With a failed ignition module, you're dead from the beginning. Check your vehicle. If you have a distributor with a small electronic box attached to it or mounted nearby on the firewall, that's your ignition module. Points-based ignition doesn't have this module. Price: $30 to $70 depending on the vehicle. Ford DuraSpark modules run about $45. GM HEI modules are similar, available at AutoZone and O'Reilly. Storage: Faraday cage. This is a semiconductor device and needs protection. Part number 4, starter motor. This is less vulnerable than the first 3 parts, but it can still fail. Starters contain electromagnetic windings and a solenoid. A strong EMP can induce currents that damage these windings. The solenoid, which is an electromagnetic switch, can also fail. The starter is what cranks your engine when you turn the key. No starter means no way to start the engine. You could push start a manual transmission vehicle, but that's difficult and not always possible depending on terrain. Symptoms: you turn the key and nothing happens. No clicking sound, no cranking. Or you hear a click but the engine doesn't turn over. Or the starter engages but spins without cranking the engine. Good news: starters are mostly mechanical and many will survive an EMP. But having a spare is insurance. If you're in a remote location and your starter fails, you're not calling a tow truck. Price: $60 to $150 depending on the vehicle. Ford F-150 starters are around $80 to $120. Jeep Cherokee starters are similar. Duralast and Ultima brands at AutoZone or O'Reilly are reliable. Storage: starters have some internal electronics in the solenoid, but they're fairly robust. You can store them in a Faraday cage for extra protection, but it's not as critical as alternators and voltage regulators. A regular plastic bin in a dry location works. That said, if you're already using a metal trash can for other parts, throw the starter in there too. Part number 5, mechanical fuel pump. This only applies if your vehicle has a mechanical fuel pump. Most carbureted vehicles from the 70s and 80s use mechanical pumps driven by the camshaft. These are not vulnerable to EMP. They're completely mechanical with no electronics. So why stock a spare? Because mechanical fuel pumps have diaphragms that can wear out. In a post-EMP world, you can't buy replacement parts. If your fuel pump fails 6 months after the collapse, you're walking unless you have a spare. Price: $20 to $50. These are cheap and essential. Ford F-150 mechanical fuel pumps run about $30. Available at any auto parts store. Storage: no Faraday cage needed. These are purely mechanical. Store in a plastic bin in a dry location. Keep away from fuel and solvents that can degrade rubber components over time. How to identify a mechanical fuel pump? It's mounted on the engine block, usually on the side, with a lever that rides on the camshaft. It has 2 fuel lines going to it, one from the tank and one to the carburetor. If your vehicle has fuel injection, you have an electric fuel pump, not a mechanical one, and electric pumps are much more vulnerable to EMP. Part number 6, distributor cap and rotor. Every vehicle with a distributor needs these. They're the parts inside the distributor that distribute spark to each cylinder. They're not electronic, they're plastic and metal. So why include them? Because they wear out. In normal times, you replace cap and rotor every 30 to 50,000 miles. Carbon tracks form, contacts corrode, and performance degrades. In a post-EMP scenario, you need spares because they will eventually fail from normal wear. Symptoms: rough idle, misfires, hard starting, reduced power. Eventually the engine won't start at all. Price: $15 to $35 for the pair. Very cheap. Ford F-150 cap and rotor sets are around $25. Jeep Cherokee sets are similar. Storage: no Faraday cage needed. These are non-electronic. Store in a plastic bin. Keep them dry because moisture can cause tracking and misfires. How many? Buy 2 sets. They're cheap and take up little space. When one set wears out, you install the spare and you still have one more backup. Part number 7. Belts and hoses. These are the most overlooked parts. Everyone focuses on electronics and forgets about rubber components. But rubber degrades over time, and in a post-collapse world, you can't buy new belts and hoses. Your engine has several critical belts. The serpentine belt or V-belts drive the alternator, water pump, and power steering. If the belt breaks, your alternator stops charging, your engine overheats, and you're stranded. Hoses carry coolant. If a hose fails, your engine overheats and you're stranded again. EMP doesn't directly damage belts and hoses, but after the collapse, you're driving more, on rougher roads, with no ability to buy replacements. Stockpile them now. What to buy? Serpentine belt or V-belts depending on your vehicle. Upper and lower radiator hoses. Heater hoses. Check your vehicle to see what it uses. If you're not sure, ask at the parts counter and they'll tell you. Price: $10 to $25 per belt, $10 to $20 per hose. For a complete set of belts and hoses for a Ford F-150, you're looking at $60 to $100 total. Storage: no Faraday cage needed. Store in a plastic bin away from sunlight, heat, and petroleum products. UV light and heat degrade rubber. Keep them in a cool, dark location like a basement or interior closet. How many? 1 complete set minimum. 2 sets if possible. Belts and hoses are cheap and lightweight. There's no excuse not to have spares. Now let's talk storage. You've bought all these parts. How do you store them so they're protected and organized? For parts with electronics, you need a Faraday cage. The simplest and cheapest option is a galvanized metal trash can with a tight-fitting metal lid. $20 to $40 at a hardware store. Attach a ground wire from the can to a metal ground rod or pipe driven into the earth. This dissipates any induced current. Line the inside of the can with cardboard. This creates an insulation layer so parts don't directly touch the metal. Place your alternator, voltage regulator, and ignition module inside. Put them in anti-static bags if you have them, but it's not required. Close the lid tightly. For mechanical parts, use plastic bins with lids. Label each bin clearly. Store in a dry location away from temperature extremes. Basements work well. Avoid garages if you live in a hot climate because heat degrades rubber. Create an inventory list. Write down every part you have, where it's stored, and what vehicle it fits. Tape this list inside the Faraday cage and keep a copy in your house. In an emergency, you don't want to be guessing what parts you have. Total cost for all 7 part categories? Here's the breakdown. Alternator, $60 to $120. Voltage regulator, if applicable, $20 to $40. Electronic ignition module, if applicable, $30 to $70. Starter, $60 to $150. Mechanical fuel pump, $20 to $50. Distributor cap and rotor, $15 to $35. Belts and hoses, $60 to $100. Grand total, around $260 to $560 depending on your specific vehicle and how many spares you buy. That's cheap insurance compared to being stranded 50 miles from home with no way to get parts. Now let's cover 3 common mistakes people make. Mistake number 1, buying the wrong parts. Not all alternators fit all vehicles. Same with starters, belts, and everything else. When you're at the auto parts store, give them your exact vehicle year, make, and model. Bring your VIN number if you have it. This ensures you get the correct parts. Better yet, bring your old part to the store and have them match it. Some people buy generic or universal parts thinking they'll work. They won't. Modern auto parts are vehicle specific. Buy the exact replacement for your vehicle. Mistake number 2, not testing parts before storing them. You buy a remanufactured alternator, take it home, put it in your Faraday cage, and forget about it for 5 years. Then the EMP happens, you pull it out, install it, and it's defective. Now you're stranded with a bad spare part. Test everything before storing it. For an alternator, have the auto parts store bench test it before you leave. Most stores do this for free. They hook it up to a tester and verify it works. Do this for the starter too. For other parts like voltage regulators and ignition modules, you can't easily test them without installing them, but at least inspect them for obvious damage and keep your receipts. Most auto parts stores have warranties ranging from 1 year to lifetime. If you discover a defective part within the warranty period, you can exchange it. After the warranty expires, you're stuck with whatever you have. Mistake number 3, forgetting tools. You have all the spare parts stockpiled. The EMP hits. Your alternator fails. You pull out your spare, and you realize you don't have the tools to install it. Now what? Stock basic hand tools along with your spare parts. You need a socket set with common sizes, a few wrenches, screwdrivers, and pliers. For most 1980s vehicles, 1/2" and 3/8" inch drive socket sets cover almost everything. Add a few combination wrenches in common sizes like 1/2", 9/16", 5/8", and 3/4. Don't forget specialty tools if your vehicle needs them. Some alternators require a special tool to tension the belt. Some starters have unusual bolt heads. Check your vehicle's service manual and make sure you have what you need. Store tools in the same location as your spare parts. A basic tool set costs $50 to $150 at Harbor Freight or similar stores. You don't need professional-grade tools for occasional repairs. Budget tools work fine. Here's your action plan. Step 1. Identify your vehicle's exact year, make, and model. Write it down. Step 2. Go to AutoZone or O'Reilly this week and price out the 7 parts. Make a list of what you need and what it costs. Step 3. Buy the most critical parts first. Start with the alternator, then voltage regulator and ignition module if applicable, then starter, then fuel pump, cap and rotor, and belts and hoses. Step 4. Test everything before storing it. Have the store bench test alternators and starters. Inspect other parts for damage. Step 5. Set up your Faraday cage storage for electronic parts and plastic bins for mechanical parts. Label everything clearly. Step 6. Buy the remaining parts over the next month or 2 as budget allows. Don't wait years. Prices are rising and availability is getting tighter. Which part are you buying first? Comment below and let me know. If this video helped you prepare, hit subscribe. Next video, I'm showing you how to actually install these parts yourself with basic tools, even if you've never worked on a car before. Step-by-step walkthroughs for alternator replacement, starter replacement, and more. You'll see exactly how to do it. Thanks for watching, and stay prepared.